The newest unicorn of India, Unacademy, the edtech startup, with its advice on what it is that teachers need to do in these unprecedented times. Speaking of edtech, there was another edtech company that came out with a press statement of raising funds. It was Eruditis, $100 million, and here's the founder in conversation with my colleague Chandra R Srikanth.
So I would say that actually we are fairly global. We are perhaps the most global edtech startup coming out of India. 80% of our students are non-India based students, 20% is India. So we would like to think of ourselves as a homegrown startup, but with global aspirations. You can look at us as a Coursera, but Coursera is what we would call a MOOC platform, massive open online courses, where it's like a content library, but the completion rates are 2%, 5%. In our case, we call ourselves a SPOC, small private online courses with very high learning outcomes, about 85 to 90% completion rates. But like Coursera, we work with the world's leading universities, MIT, Harvard, Berkeley, INSEAD. And in India, we're working with IITs, with IIMs, with XLRI and MICA, etc. We're working with universities in China, Latin America. So there's no one model that defines us. We are not a cut, copy, paste type of a startup. There are many like that across the world in India as well, which is great, which is also our moat and differentiation.
Right. In fact, Ashwin, I was just going through some of the courses, and I think if I pay 1 lakh for a 6-month course in IIT Bombay or TAPME, I better complete it. Unlike the other courses on Udemy or a Coursera that you sign up for, but you just forget about it after some time. So tell me about the kind of mix. You said a majority of your participants are actually from abroad. So is it a majority from the US? Are you also seeing interest in India picking up?
So again, every market for us is important. In India, like I said, 20% of our students. So this year, that will be 20,000 students from India. Overall, we'll do about 1 lakh students. And that's still a 2x growth. But look, China is growing, LATAM is growing, US is growing. So India is a very important market for us. Let's be clear about that. The two largest markets are the US and India. But also keep in mind, Chandra, that about 15% of our students are in courses that are taught in Spanish, Portuguese, and Mandarin. And so one of the reasons why we have been able to go deep into those regional markets is because you can now take an MIT course in Spanish. And look, our mission was always to make high quality education accessible and affordable. So I'm going to talk about that affordability part. But part of access is online. Part of access is also language.
How are you handling the Mandarin Portuguese? I mean, are you working on the translation, or are you working with universities that offer it in these languages? How does that work?
65 people in Mexico City. We have 35 people in Shanghai. So we have local teams that we have built quietly over the years. Wow. Okay. And there are two options when you do a Spanish course, right? So you can take a course, like I said, an MIT or a Berkeley or a Cambridge course, which is taught in English, but the entire platform, the technology, all of that is translated into Spanish. And we have local experts who bring in the local industry knowledge into those courses. But we're also working with the local schools, which is IPADE in Mexico, for example, INCA in Costa Rica, Austral in Argentina, to offer these courses. And those are taught in native language, Spanish itself. So there's no need for translation. So we do a combination of both. Same with China. We also work with Fudan, Hong Kong Business School, with Hong Kong University. So we are an Indian startup, but as you can see, with a very global wings, which we are very proud of. We started off in a small little office in Andheri, in Mumbai, and we have offices now in San Francisco, Boston, Dubai, Singapore, Shanghai, Mexico City, soon in Sao Paulo, and hopefully in Europe as well.
Right. And Ashwin, what are the most popular courses on your platform right now? I mean, the number 1, 2, 3 programs that everybody is after.
Given the before and during the pandemic world, what was always in demand is skill-based courses. Anything that if you can do, you can demonstrate to your company or to a potential recruiter to say, hey, I have the skills of the future that are valued, and that will therefore I need to get a slight bump in my career or salary. What are those skills, right? So those are digital skills, digital strategies, digital marketing, artificial intelligence. These are data science skills, Python, whether it's data science, whether it is machine learning. And these are new age digitization topics like fintech, like blockchain, or for example, even things around cybersecurity and so on and so forth. So these are the topics. If you ask me the top three, it'll be digital, data science kind of topics which are most in demand.
And what would the profile of professionals be who are signing up? Are these people with a few years of work ex, freshers who perhaps want to upgrade their skills? What would the age profile look like?
So again, we are very much in the skilling and upskilling category. So the age experience tends to be mid to senior working executive. So anywhere from 5 years work experience to 15 years of work experience. So these people may not have, for example, when I went to my college, data science, fintech, blockchain, robotic process automation, these were not even taught. These were not even topics in vogue at that time. And all of us now realize that to be relevant in our current roles and in the future, we have to upgrade ourselves, right? In fact, we now believe that over a period in our careers, we might change jobs 7 to 10 times. But our parents probably change the job once or maybe twice. So the reason you change these jobs is because there are new opportunities in these new areas, right? So it's really a question of the skilling and upskilling is where we see the largest demand. By the way, if you look at India, NASSCOM had come out with a report a few years back where they said that there's a huge talent deficit in these areas. The only 1 out of 10 engineers that are hired from the campus are actually employable. And this is why people like an Infosys or Genpact and Wipro spend many crores setting up their own training academies and all of that. And we are trying to address that problem, saying, hey, why can't we give job-ready students or working professionals to companies?
Right. So Ashwin, do you, in that sense, have a tie-up with any of these companies then that want to offer executive education programs if they do not have, say, the training apparatus of an Infosys, which has a training institute in Mysore? Will you then step in?
Absolutely. And even for an Infosys, right, while they do a lot of training themselves, some of the new age topics, even they themselves have to build the capability to train in, right? So if you take, for example, something like, say, machine learning or AI, that is actually changing even as we speak. The application of AI is changing, right? And so for them to say, oh, look, there's an MIT artificial intelligence course, or there's a self-driving course that's coming from, again, a top institution across the world, is valuable to them. So even for the large companies, while they do a bunch of stuff in-house, platforms like us give them a great opportunity to access the world's best knowledge. And that's valuable to them.
Right. Ashwin, you're obviously in the news because of your latest round of fundraising. I read that it values you at over 700 to 800 million, which makes you a soonicorn. You're getting to be a unicorn. But tell us how this worked out. I mean, the kind of investors you have include Prosus and the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. How did this come about? And interestingly, you have some investors who are also investors in, say, a Byju's and an Unacademy. If I look at Sequoia in your cap table.
It's amazing, right? I mean, a few months back, EdTech was not even getting the kind of attention that it deserved. And today people are saying it's getting too much attention. We spent our first 7 years, we started in 2010 till 2017. We really didn't raise an institutional round, but we proved product market fit. We went from 0 to 10 million.
For 7 years?
For nearly 7 years. And this is my second startup. My first startup was a company called Travel Guru. That was also Sequoia backed. It was acquired by Travelocity. So, obviously had some capital to put in, but went from 0 to $10 million. Then from 2017 till 2020, next 3 years, we went from 10 to 100. And now we think we'll add 100 million just this year by going from 100 to 200. So the scale of growth is really rapid, which is what I think excites investors. By the way, and that just is a testimony to the fact that education and online education is here to stay. Right? Given all that's happening across the world, across categories, it's here to stay. It's going to happen in K-12, Byju's. It's going to happen in test prep, that's Unacademy. In higher ed, that's us. There'll be other players as well, but these are market leaders.
Yeah,
and yes, many of us
for like the really young children who want to learn AI and all.
But that's K-12 again, right? So it's K-12,
K-12
not curricular, it's something else. Great company, again, now in Byju's hands will do very well. And many investors have realized this. So for example, 3 of our investors are also investors in Byju's. Sequoia, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, and NASPER, Prosus.
Yeah.
Sequoia is also an investor in Unacademy.
Unacademy.
Some investors have really started this. They have this thesis on education earlier than others. And look, for us, these are great investors, right? Because somebody like the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, they have a whole, let's say, a practice on just learning science, which we hope to tap into. Similarly, Naspers is the largest investor in Udemy, very large in China with their holding in Tencent. So there are things that we can leverage there. So we always think of investors as adding value beyond the money. And in this case, we've been fortunate to find 3 investors who do exactly that.
Right. And Ashwin, going forward, you're also different because you're already profitable. Unlike the trend that we have seen in the last few years where startup would struggle to kind of reach profitability or generate cash flows. So that also makes you a different kind of startup. You also plan to double revenues. Tell us a little about your numbers.
Yeah, so like I said, our fiscal 20, we did 100 million. Fiscal 21, we'll do $200 million in revenue. We will end up with about $5 to $10 million in EBIT in FY21. We were break even in our last quarter, April, May, June. And it's my belief that growth and profitability are not necessarily contradictory, especially in education. One thing I must say is that every sector is different. But in education, the unit metrics are actually quite favorable. And if they're not, that's a bigger problem. In fact, Byju's also, I hear, is break-even and profitable. But also, it's an entrepreneur's mindset. If from day one you believe, and that's why I said that it took us 7 years to prove the model, figure out the product market fit, before we started running faster and scaling faster. So if you believe in having the discipline of building a profitable company from the early get-go, I think it's very much possible. I think, by the way, thanks to COVID, many companies now have realized that profitability is important. Every investor has told them that cut your burn and all of that.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that always catches up. The truly great companies, if you look at, today, if you look at the NASDAQ and the trillion-dollar companies, they're all wildly profitable. They might have taken some time to get there, but ultimately profitability is the validation of the model. Everything else, like how many offices you have, how many employees you have, your top line and your registered users, etc. These are all vanity metrics, right? Profitability ultimately is the bottom line.
Right. And Ashwin, tell us a little about the founding team. Did all of you come from the previous startup? And I believe you'll still have a significant stake in your company. So that's also something unusual that there hasn't been a lot of dilution. But tell us a little about the founding team.
So my co-founder Chaitanya Bits-Pilani worked and studied at INSEAD. So he actually worked in executive education at INSEAD, and INSEAD became our very first partner. And so he brings kind of this academic mindset of, what's the right curriculum, what's the learning science and tech behind this. Our head of online certificates, Sean Dubash, actually, worked with me in my earlier startup, Travel Guru. He's based in the US. And so it's a solid team. Our chief operating officer, Ajay Vadia, used to work in Masterclass as the head of technology. Our head of learning and design, Ashley, worked at MIT before she joined us. So it's a solid team. It's a very global team. Most of these people sit in Singapore, in West Coast, East Coast, in other parts of the world. And it's a great team because we all share this passion of making education accessible and affordable at scale. I think it's a team that comes with a lot of education background, but also background of scaling and building large outcomes.
In terms of a medium to long-term view, will you continue to stay on and scale this up to an even bigger level? Perhaps you can even get it listed, or if there is an opportunity to sell out to a bigger investor, you will take that. How do you see this panning out?
Yeah, I don't think about these things. I do think about building a solid, high-growth, profitable company, and then eventually, whatever that exit is, it will come. I mean, let me be clear here: there has to be an exit. We have investors. But one of the reasons why we selected some of these investors, if you look at, for example, Naspers, which is Prosus, they're not a fund. They're a corporate balance sheet investment. So they have a 10-year view on things. They hold on to shares. They sold their shares in Flipkart only because Walmart was buying. Otherwise, they would have held on, right? So we like to have these long-term views, investors. My own view is, let's build a large outcome. Education is a $280 billion space. We are 100 million going to 200 million, which is a drop in the ocean. So, in the next 12 months, we will enroll 100,000 students. That's a very small number. There are 30 million students just in India in higher ed. So 100,000, 1 lakh students is a small number. So our scale of ambition is high, Chandra. I think there's a lot to grow organically as well as inorganically. And at the right time, but again, it's not even in our planning horizon. Maybe this is 5 years from now. We'll figure out what the right answer is.
Right. Finally, Ashwin, just want to understand, in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of trust in India on Atmanirbhar apps. You've seen, hundreds of Chinese apps getting banned overnight. What is your own view on this? I mean, though you are an Indian company, you do have a presence in China, you told me. How do you view all these developments as an entrepreneur? Are we mixing up geopolitical issues with startups? Because half of India's unicorns have Chinese investors on their cap table. So what risks do you see from this approach?
Yeah, I think, ultimately every startup, including us, we benefit from an ecosystem that we exist in. So if you're based in India, Mumbai, Bangalore, etc., this ecosystem, the people that come from this country, the talent, the VCs, many of the VCs who are funding them are India-based funds, right? At least the early stages, etc. So we always have to be mindful of the fact that we are all successful, but we are successful because we're in a certain ecosystem, and we have to respect that ecosystem. So for whatever reason, if the government says that, hey, for security or otherwise, I fully endorse that view. That's my personal view, because my country always comes first and all of us come secondary after that, right? Having said that, it's a global place. And the thing that as an entrepreneur, I would like to see is a level playing field in every market, right? So to give you an example, if a Facebook and a Google is banned in China, if some of our own Indian apps are not allowed in China, then when the reverse happens and the US or India bans some apps, why is there even an uproar about it? It's why should it be unequal? So there shouldn't be a one-way street, there should be a two-way street. For us specifically, look, we are a majority Indian-owned company. Like you said, the promoters own a majority of that company. So there's no question of us having Chinese influence, etc. Though yes, we may play in China as a market. So that's my view on this. I know there are a lot of questions being asked, and today people are saying, hey, let's look at capital elsewhere. The truth also, Chandra, is there's enough capital behind good ideas. You're not dependent on any one country to do that. Eventually, my hope is that these things settle out. And the best outcome, by the way, is not banning each other's apps. The best outcome is actually a level playing field where everybody is treated equally. Look, the ease of doing business for an Indian company to do business in, say, Europe or US is quite easy. But it's not the same in some other markets, right? You have to have a different corporate structure. You have to have local ownership, etc. Whereas in India, we allow ownership from anywhere. Flipkart, I don't think was an Indian company, even though we all celebrate it. So we are very open. Why should our partners who we trade with or work with have closed doors? So I'm all for an even playing field. And I think, to be fair, our government has taken some bold moves. I know it's controversial, but as an Indian, I'll always back our government.